sometimes just because we want or don't want something is all that the answer needs to be. Like, just to say this is working for me, this isn't working for me. You know, when I'm getting into that, trying to justify it and explain it,
yes,
I would agree with you that that very much is a sign that, you know, we're just, something's off. Something's off. And I know too, like, one of the things I remember from human design and, you know, I know you and I have geeked out with it to varying degrees over the years. But I also remember somebody saying once, like, none of us are meant to make decisions from our head.
Yeah.
You know, we might be gut people, we might be emotional, like sleep on it people, we might be intuitive. There's a few different ways we're wired to make decisions, but none of us are meant to make decisions from our head. And yet, what does the world teach us?
Retreat and Grow Rich, the podcast. I'm Darla LeDoux, best-selling author, coach, and retreat leader. And I'm on a mission to normalize transformation on the planet, one intimate retreat at a time. This show's dedicated to the coaches, consultants, healers, leaders, and light workers who are here to hold space for the truth that transforms lives and get paid for it. Expert retreat and business tips, strategies, stories, and magic. It's your weekly mini retreat delivered right to your ears. Let's do this. Hi, Tina. Welcome to this episode of Retreat and Grow Rich, the podcast. And we're here in our Transforming Out Loud series. I want to just dive in. Our relationship goes back some time. I actually met Tina, for those of you watching. First of all, Tina Forsyth, you heard her bio, but she was really the inventor, I will say, the innovator who coined the phrase online business manager and wrote the book and really created that whole industry in a lot of ways. I mean, it was happening in a lot of places, but you were a voice who said, hey, this is a real career. This is something that you can do. You can work from home. You trained people on how to work with entrepreneurs. I know I took a training from you years ago on how to hire, and you are really, you know, the expert at this point when it comes to hiring and team and the team that supports those of us who are entrepreneurs by nature. So you've been around a long time. You already had your book and you were, you know, established as a business owner when I met you in Mastermind years ago. When I first started my business, it was 10 years ago. Actually, this is my 10th year anniversary. It might be 9, but right around there.
Yeah.
We were in a mastermind together and Tina was like rocking it out. This is from my perspective, because I jumped all in. You know, I'm not someone to dilly-dally around. I was like, all right, I'm doing this business. I'm going all in. And Tina was really established and kind of had things cruising from what I could see from, you know, it was like, oh, I can't wait. I had listened to you on an interview before I met you. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're that person. So did you know that? No. I know I told you that, but you may not remember that. You had done an interview with Andrea Lee that I had listened to before I ever met you.
Yeah.
So, you know, 10 years ago we met. You were doing your OBM business, things were kind of cruising, but you joined this mastermind and you were really looking for some kind of shift, some kind of transformation for you in your business. Can you kind of take us back there?
Well, you know, it's funny when you were saying when we met and you were like, oh, she's got it all together kind of thing. I mean, I don't know that maybe
I get that's not how you felt.
That way. Well, you know, it's interesting though. It's actually something that always comes up for me in the business journey is this perspective of, and at times this expectation that I'll put on myself that I have to appear like I have my shit together all the time. And not to say that I didn't. Like, I remember when we first met in that mastermind group, and I was very much, I had already been in business for a number of years, working one-on-one you know, as an OBM and a few other things for probably about 10 years before then. And when you and I met in that mastermind, that was the time when I was like taking things to the next level, when I was shifting from like me doing my one-on-one thing through to like training and mentoring and coaching and various things at that point. And so the journey of that mastermind was in many ways, the start of up-leveling and really transforming. I don't even know that I would have realized it at the time, but I think you would agree there was a lot of transformation that happened and or started.
Well, and in that container of the program we were in, which had live retreats, which of course, you know, I believe are always transformational in nature when you're bringing truth to the room. So just the nature of the program, we were bound to.
I know for me, one of the things, like I remember one of our first retreat, it was that one I think they were all in Vegas, maybe that Red Rock, something, I can't remember the place, but I remember you and I and a few people having a drink at one point during that retreat. But it came up in the room where everybody got to talking about their relationship and everything. And I know for me at the time, so I had been married for a number of years. And, you know, I also knew pretty darn quick. And if I recall, I think David might have even asked us about this in some level, right? Like how relationships, or we got to talking in the room about how certain relationships either need to shift and grow with us or they need to fall away. And like, I knew then that my marriage was not going to last, right? Like I just knew. And that would have been what, 2010-ish time frame?
Yep.
I think. But it was amazing to see how, and to start to really see and understand that I knew this moment of truth, like in a gut level, that things were off and that they weren't going to work out in the long run. But it was still close to probably another, well, at least 3.5 years after that, before any changes were actually made at all. Yeah. And being able to, I mean, that's just one example of, I think a part of that for me was also that there was a part of me hanging on to this idea of like, okay, everything, I need to hold everything together. I need to look like I'm holding it all together all the time. And I need to like make this work out, or at least make it look like it's, I don't even want to say that I was trying to make it look like it was working out when it wasn't, but it was sort of this real inclination of like, I'm the one who's got all our shit together. So I need to keep my shit together is basically feeling like, right?
Isn't it interesting that that's what I chose to say about you today? You kind of had it all together, because that is the thing often that keeps us from transforming. Yes. And it's really the reason I launched this series about transforming out loud, because it so often, whether it is something that happens that we feel like we have to hide, or some change that we know we need to make that's going to fundamentally shift how we think people view us. What I know, I'm divorced. When I first was divorced, it was really freeing, but it also felt like I have totally failed. That was my experience, which actually was like, oh my gosh, I can fail and not die.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for you, when you're in that moment, and I know I was in a relationship at that time that needed to end, but I wasn't married. When you're in that moment and you're being posed with the question of, does a relationship grow with you or does it need to end? And you have that gut feeling. Mm-hmm. Yet then there's all the chatter about what does it mean to actually listen to this? What was that like for you?
It's amazing how good I am at letting the chatter get in the way. Cause I was married in 2001 and we split up in 2013. So what, give or take 12-ish years in total. My gut knew before we even got married that it wasn't, it just wasn't a match. Like it just wasn't a match. And I remember, because to give a little bit of context in that regard, like we were already living together. We were I knew there was a ring that had already been purchased. There was no surprise that a proposal was coming, back in the day. And yet the actual night of the proposal, it was like a New Year's Eve. We were at a ski hill. It was no surprise that this was coming. When the proposal came to me, the first word out of my mouth was no. It was just a gut response.
You said it out loud?
I said it out loud. I said, nope. I said it out loud. And then we went back. Then, I went back and I was thinking about it. And then, oh my gosh, right here's where the head kicks in, right? Oh, but we're already living together. And what are people going to think? And blah, blah, blah. And then feeling bad, like feeling guilty or feeling bad for having hurt, this person. And so my no became a yes, probably within like 30 minutes, right? Like it was a pretty quick turnaround. But I look back on that, and I look back on similar things over the years. Like one of my biggest lessons has been and continues to be honoring my gut response, like being able to really honor what my gut is telling me. When I can honor that, it's always right, like right for me. I want to be clear with that. Like my gut, it's right for me in the moment, that response.
And you and I both are fans of human design, which I have an earlier podcast episode about human design if people aren't familiar with that. But when you're designed with the gut response, and 70% of people have some kind of instantaneous response.
Yeah.
So
well, I remember when I learned that, that's actually part of what led to my divorce. Cause you and I were in that mastermind. I already knew then, like, yeah, there's something not quite working here, but like tried, both my husband and I both to like, all right, what about this? And what about that? And let's try to make this work. And then when I had my very first human design reading, which would be just over 6 years ago now, I think, that's where I learned about my gut response, and that listening to my gut is the way that I'm wired. And I remember him saying to me too, he's like, anytime you start listening to what's in your head, that's where you're going to get yourself off track. And it was honestly one of those moments that was like, it was like kind of this light bulb moment. Like I could look down one way, and I'm talking anything from like buying my first house, buying a car, like big things in life. When my gut said, yes, do it. And I did it, it was all good. But then when I didn't listen to my gut, when I didn't honor that response and let my head talk me into things, that's where the challenges, that's where the struggles would come into play. And of course, my marriage being one of those.
So you could think back to when you talked yourself into saying yes originally.
Oh, yes.
And then again, your gut said no, but you stayed for like 3 more years. And obviously you have kids. So that's a piece of, I'm sure, what you were thinking through.
Well, and
how'd that go?
Well, here's the piece too. This is the part that was ultimately challenging, is because from a logical perspective, there was no reason for us to get divorced, right? There was nothing going on that was like, oh, this person's cheating, this person's, abusive, or this person, like there was none of that going on. I mean, we'd have our own, fights over things and whatever, nothing, pretty standard stuff, frustrations here and there. But in many ways, like, we were very compatible day to day and living together and stuff like that. So it was really like logically, it didn't make any sense for us to get divorced. And then you have kids in the mix, right? Because I mean, my girls at that point were 5 and 7 when we did split up. That adds a whole other layer in for all kinds of reasons. So part of it was this idea of like, well, how would I explain this to people? How would I couldn't even explain it to myself. So how am I going to explain this to other people? And I remember when we actually split up, it wasn't even anything earth shattering. It was just another day, another conversation that we had had, a few times before. And I just remember being like, I'm done. Right? Like, and that was the conversation we had. Like, we've kind of wrung this towel dry. We've tried everything we can try here. I can't even explain why, other than the fact that we're done with this. And it turned out to be, exactly the thing that needed to happen on both sides of the coin, right? I mean, I can share my story. It's not up to me to share my ex's story, but the idea of like, I remember people saying at the time too, you know, well, why don't you get back together? Or conversations with my parents, like, why, you know, why would you break up and what was going on and blah, blah, blah. And it's hard to be like, I can't explain it to you. It just,
I just knew.
I just knew, like, I just knew it's a no, it's not going to work. Right.
Tina, do you think that for people listening, if they go into thinking about how they would explain it to someone, do you think that's a clue that maybe they're not listening to what's true for them?
Well, and I think too that what I've come to learn, so that really started one of the I would say that was the first and biggest lesson of recent years around listening to my gut, honoring that over my head. And it took me like 12 years to get to that point, even though my gut knew right away. I've continued to have this in variations of other scenarios in my business since then. I think there's a piece of, and what I'm really learning to honor is sometimes just because we want or don't want something is all that the answer needs to be. Like, just to say this is working for me, this isn't working for me. You know, when I'm getting into that, trying to justify it and explain it.
Yes.
I would agree with you that that very much is a sign that, you know, we're just, something's off. Something's off. And I know too, like, one of the things I remember from human design and, you know, I know you and I have geeked out with it to varying degrees over the years. But I also remember somebody saying once, like, none of us are meant to make decisions from our head.
Yeah.
We might be gut people, we might be emotional, like sleep on it people, we might be intuitive. There's a few different ways we're wired to make decisions, but none of us are meant to make decisions from our head. And yet, what does the world teach us? You know, think about it, analyze it, you know, write it out, blah, blah, like all that.
Pros and
cons and all kinds of.
I used to make, you know, I'm a recovering engineer. I used to make spreadsheets, you know, with weighting how important an attribute was to the decision.
Yeah.
Like weighted spreadsheets, no joke.
Well, and I think too that I know for me is, and I've had things even up until like this past week or so, where it's just like decisions being made that I can't explain beyond the fact that I'm just following what my gut's telling me.
Yeah.
And that honestly has been probably will continue to be one of my bigger, I don't want to say challenges, but definitely an ongoing journey and lesson for me to learn. Because the flip side of this too is when there's also a lot of like, I will take I don't want to hurt other people, right? Or I have a bit of that people pleaser, avoid confrontation, whatever you want to call it, in me as well too. And so I'm very aware of, in relationships, you know, even in relationships with team members and such as well over the years, that there's times that I've hung on to things too long there because I didn't want to hurt the other person. Right? There's times I've hung on to and continued to work with people on my team in ways that were no longer serving ultimately, you know, either side, but because I felt responsible for or felt bad for or whatever that may be, that comes all up in here again too. I would continue to like let things, you know, kind of keep chugging along when again, my gut knew.
And yeah, how is that similar to the marriage dynamic?
It's a mix of, I think it's a mix of not wanting to, I think there's probably a couple of things. And in particular, when I think of team stuff, this is usually what will come up for me. There's been a couple of instances where I've worked really well with people for a period of time, but then you can hit an expiry date with people in our teams. And like, I've had people work with me for like 7 or 8 years in the business and work really, really well together. And even those long-term relationships, there came a point where it's like, this person's, you know, headed off in a different direction now. There's just things are shifting and changing. We're all continuing to evolve over time. And it didn't make sense for us to keep trying. And on both sides of the coin, you know, this would happen. This happened with a couple of different team members where it was like trying to kind of hang on, you know, like, but it used to be so good, or it used to, you know, all that kind of stuff. There was a bit of trying to hang on to that. And then on the other side of that coin of like, oh, I don't want to deal with the fact that I'm going to have to like make a change here. Right? Because that's the other thing that comes up. Like, oh, if I'm going to make a change, that means like when I'm thinking.
That's when the head kicks in, right? All of the logical things that need to be handled.
Well, and or even the fear of it, you know, it's like, oh, I'm going to have to like, what if I can't find somebody else? Or what if I have to do this? Or, oh, I just don't feel like it, or whatever some of that stuff might be. Because I'm sure anyone who's, you know, when you have team and when you're building out your business that way, it's challenging. It can be challenging at times. And yet it is very much a similar thing though. I've had a few instances of where it's been like, yeah, my gut knew that things weren't working out, but then I also just tried to make it work out. Yes. That's where this kicked in. I'm going to try to make this work out anyways. But then my gut knew it wasn't going to work out. So then it's like, oh, you know, like at what point do I just start listening to my gut earlier?
Yeah.
Right away.
Well, so let's go back to, because I think the divorce, like a lot of people can relate to relationships ending.
Yeah.
What did you learn in that time? So like what happened after you made the decision? Because I know, you know, you're going along and you're like, okay, I have to have it all together. Mm-hmm. I have to, you know, keep it looking like I have it all together. And a lot of that is programming, right? From childhood of like that being your role of being the one who has it all together. Yeah. So when you went through that experience and are, you know, moving through all of this challenge, how did that support you in beginning to shift the having it all together persona?
Yeah.
And like, what were the challenges in that?
Well, the biggest challenge was recognizing that I don't have it all together and being able to learn how to ask for help, and being okay with that.
So recognizing it for yourself was first, like to go, oh, hey.
Well, here's what would happen. Like after the divorce, you know, people would say, oh my gosh, Tina, you know, how's Dan? How's the girls? How's whatever? What's going on? You know, all that kind of stuff. And they'd be like, oh, I know you'll be fine. Right. And it was like, and that happened like over and over and over and over again. So with people who knew me well, or people who didn't know me as well, right? Like, you know, friends, family, whatever, and other work people. And I remember it got to the point relatively quickly where I'm just like, well, what about me? You know, what about me? Like, ask about me. And I'm not going to say that nobody asked about me, but from my perspective, they weren't. Yeah. Right. But here's the thing, because I had always worn I've got it all together, you know, suit of armor, even in some ways. You know, this is the thing too, though, right? It's like, it actually is a strength of mine. Like, I know I'm very grounded. I know I'm there's strengths in who I am and what I do and how I show up and what I bring to the table. There's a strength in that kicks in, but it showed kind of up in the shadow side of it really started to show up for me after the divorce, because I was like, I needed help. I wanted help, but I also didn't know how to ask for it either. I didn't know how to ask for it.
Did you know what you needed?
I would say right off the bat, I didn't. I remember having a conversation with someone who was like, oh, it's going to take, you know, it takes a good couple of years for things to settle after a divorce. I remember somebody telling me this and I'm like, give me a couple of months, you know, like fine kind of deal. And that person was right. Like it really did take a couple of years for things to settle. And it also, I mean, if anything, it really started to show me the opportunities to ask for and receive help that I was not taking advantage of.
Yeah.
I have great relationships. I've got a lot of people around me. I mean, like you and I, Darla, stayed connected over the years. Like I've got some really great connections with people in many ways. And people that I know, if I was to say, hey, can I ask you for something? Could I get your help with something, et cetera, that they'd be like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm not surrounded by this, but I'm not always asking for it. Yeah. And that's the piece that really started to show up, even to the degree of things like with, in relation to the kids and in relation to other aspects in the business, and just like it showed up everywhere in life. It showed up everywhere in life. It wasn't just like the one thing. Yeah.
And so becoming aware, first of all, that maybe you needed some support, and then that you didn't know how to ask. And that, like, how did you move through that, and what have you taken with you?
It's looking to be more clear. So first and foremost for myself, and this is something I need to remind myself of on a pretty regular basis, because I think that whatever programming, that I was raised with in whatever way, shape, or form, like that stuff goes pretty deep, right? Like my default mode is always, let me figure it out, let me roll up my sleeves, let me blah, blah, blah. Like that's my default mode. And so to a degree, I have to be pretty vigilant with, okay, where could I use some help? Where would I like to have some help? And again, this can be life or business. It can be on either side of the coin. And then being very purposeful to ask for it and to receive it, and it can still feel bloody uncomfortable for me. It almost feels decadent sometimes to be like, oh, I'm going to ask for help with something when, like, in theory, I could do this on my own.
So decadent in a way that you might judge.
Yeah, like almost like,
as opposed to like, ooh, it feels really decadent. I love it.
Well, yeah, it almost becomes like a little guilty pleasure. Like it's like, ooh, I love it. And then there's that part of me at times though, that I have to be really vigilant with. That's sort of like, oh, you could do that yourself. And it's funny for me, I'm much better at asking for help in my business than I am in my personal life. Yeah. Right? Some people it might be opposite, or it might be a little even. I'm much better at asking for help and continue to evolve in my own leadership, of course, but with team and such over the years, I've learned a lot in that regard. For me, it's more on the personal side, when it's kind of like, hey, can you come help with the kids, right? Or something along those lines. Like those are the kind of things where I might be a little bit like, it might kick in some of that. I don't know if that's mom guilt or whatever, whatever to call that. At times.
Well, I think it can be a little more vulnerable, right? We have this, like when you're doing a business, well, first of all, you're paying people. So there's that. But there's, an agreement that of course you need help in your business.
Yeah.
But in life, we have this way of feeling like, you should be able to do life on your own, right?
Well, and even things, like
cultural value.
I mean, I have a house cleaner. I've had her forever. Like I'm not, I'm fine with that. Like, I think but there are certain things too, where I'm like, for years now, it's been like, oh, I would love to get help with like meals, like meal prep and all that kind of stuff. But then there's like, oh no, I'm supposed to like cooking. I don't, let's get real. I'm in my mid 40s and I still don't like it. I don't think that's going to change, but it's like, oh, I should, be doing this, or I should be doing that, or whatever some of those things are, that kick in. And, the asking for help thing, like it's been a huge part of my own challenge. And it's also something that comes up all the time for my clients. Like one of the things I've had my clients do in some programs and such around this idea of asking beyond what's comfortable. Go into, I don't know about you, Darla, but some people may relate to this. Like I can go into a grocery store and I'm looking for a certain type of mustard or something. And somebody can come up and say, hey, can I help you find something? I don't have any idea where this mustard is, but I'll still be like, no, I'm good, thanks. And then I'll walk around and keep looking for it on my own. It's like, what the hell? Like this person just said, can I help you find something? And I'm like, no, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Like it's that piece. that just starting to learn to say, yes, I'd like this help, like ask for help, and then also be able to receive it.
We always talk about asking someone to help put your luggage up, even if you're capable of doing it on your own.
Yes.
As a practice, right?
Yeah, as a practice, exactly. And there's something, and I don't know, I mean, I can only speak as a woman, being a woman, so not to say this doesn't apply across the board. But there is something about the, like, we, you know, the have it all, or we should have it all, or we should be able to do it all kind of thing. Like, it really, I think that's also done a number in certain ways on us, where I know it has for me a little bit, like, where I should be able to be, you know, like, oh, I'm a mom, I'm a single mom, I'm a business owner, I'm a woo. And it's kind of like, yeah, okay. And then at the same time, it's like, good Lord, if anybody needs help, like I do,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. And it becomes a heavy burden to carry if I'm not purposeful that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one of the things I teach is how transformation works. And I want to kind of frame it up to the situation where you're realizing you need to leave your marriage.
Yep.
And I also want to look at, and how does that shown up recently? What I want for this series is to really, first of all, free people to recognize that just because things happen in life that people might feel are major, like a divorce, right? That it's just a decision, and it's just part of the process of becoming more whole and complete in who we are.
Yeah.
And the less we judge it and the more we embrace it, the easier it becomes to lead. So in the process of transformation that I teach, we have this first stage, which is discomfort, like something isn't quite feeling comfortable, and then desire. And we'll just use the context of the mastermind. So you joined because there was some desire or some discomfort, right? Something you wanted to change or something you wanted to move toward.
Yeah.
Do you remember what that was that had you join?
Yeah. I mean, at that point, I had just hit 6 figures in my business, kind of doing my own thing in that way. And there was a big desire to like take the business to the next level. So financially was a part of it. But even more so like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I wanted to create something, excuse me, bigger than me. And, you know, absolutely some ego and such that was in there too, right? From like, hey, let me create something really cool and put it out there. And, you know, I mean, there was also a lot at that time, which I think still can continue to this time. There was a lot of like, everybody else is doing it, you know, I should too.
Yes.
Kind of thing. And I felt that way about it, where it's like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm supposed to do next. And this is what it's supposed to look like.
Right.
Woo! So there was like a lot of that leading into that time.
Yeah. And I'm imagining like the creating just because I want to, like there was a certain leadership that was calling to you.
Well, definitely. I mean, you mentioned the OBM side, the certified OBM side of things. I mean, I had written my book. I had started an association. I had done 1 training, and it was really this call to lead space for me, to be able to say, okay, like I need to be officially stepping out in front of this and making it my only thing. See, the other thing that happened at that point was, I spent a good few years kind of doing both things, right? Like I was working still as an online business manager for a couple of clients while I was writing my book and building up and running the first certification training and et cetera. And when I joined that mastermind, that was a time where I knew, okay, I had to drop the being and working as an OBM side, and I had to strictly focus on this new side. And until I did that, like as I made that decision and let go of some of that old stuff, that's where things really shifted and changed. But it was definitely a call to lead in that regard. Like, and a call to lead, I mean, I feel like that could be a whole other topic, right? But it's not always a call that we're willingly wanting to answer in some ways.
Well,
right?
and I think, and this is what I see a lot. And what I hear in your story is a lot of times we hear the call to lead and it's like, oh, okay. Like some part of us knows that's what I'm meant to do.
Yeah.
But we have no idea what that really means. And,
No.
and if we did, we probably wouldn't do it.
Honest
Right?
God, that's true. I mean, there's a little bit of like, there's times I look back over certain things in the past 10 years, let's say. And it's like, ooh, if I'd known that ahead of time, I don't know,
Yeah.
but in hindsight, it's all great because it's all part of the growth and expansion. Absolutely.
So when we have that desire or that call, then comes the commitment stage, which a lot of times is, in our world is joining a program, right? Signing up for a container to support the transformation, like that shift into the desire. And
or letting go of something. I know this comes up a lot when I work with my clients in this space. It's often things like letting go of certain clients, letting go of certain team members, letting go of certain programs. Like there's a two-sided coin to that comes into play, right? Where it's like we can see where we're headed, and then also being willing to let go of certain things as well.
And we don't always know what to let go of. And I think that's the piece, like once we're committed, I
don't know. In my experience, I've always freaking known what to let go of. I just wasn't always willing to face it.
Well, that's, yeah. Well, but did you know going in to the mastermind that you were going to need to leave your marriage to get to where you wanted to go?
Well, first and foremost, when our very first mastermind meeting, I was still partnered with Andrea Lee doing the OBM training and certification. And her and I had, we'd worked together and she played a key role in creating that with me. And I remember that very first mastermind meeting, as she put it, we broke up. She's like, and we're really good. We're still very close. We're good friends and do all kinds of things together. But it was like very first, it was like, oh, Andrea and I can't do this together, right? Like she has her thing and she was doing her stuff. And then, I was really wanting to focus on this. So I knew that needed to end, and that ended right away. We both knew it needed to end.
And you knew it before you even stepped into
we left that first retreat. So we were there the first day of the retreat. That night was like, oh yeah, this is gonna, this needs to change. And I also knew from then too, that my marriage was going to end at a certain point.
Yeah.
And that's the gut thing. That's where I say, I don't know if it's true for everybody to always know what needs to change. I often know, I don't always know where I'm headed, but I do know what I need to let go of. Yeah. That's probably been more true.
Yeah.
For my journey than the opposite. Like I really don't, there's many times I don't always know where I'm headed.
What do you think keeps people from being present to the truth of what they need to let go of? Because to me, that's where the transformation happens, when we can get present to the truth and embrace it.
I know for me, when I'm hanging on to things past their like expiry date, it's usually a mix of wanting what I wanted it to be true and kind of being in denial that it's not. It's a mix of that, like, but this or that, or it could be this, or I thought it would be that, or whatever. It's a mix of that, combined with the not wanting to deal with the fact that ending something's hard too. Yeah, it always is. Like letting go of, if we're letting go of clients or letting go of team or letting go of, like business, certain things that we used to do and we're not going to do anymore. Like any time we're ending something, it's challenging. And it also brings up like, I'm going to end this. So now, I'm going to have to take a look at this and deal with this side of it too, right? Like,
yeah, because a lot of times the thing we have to let go of is something that's a nice pattern we're running or excuse that we have going that keeps us from the next thing.
And it's really easy to tolerate. Like, we can tolerate things and be comfortable as long as we want to be. But then there's a bit of there's an erosion that happens in that too. And I think for me over the years, if anything, I've gotten to the point where, because it always comes to me to a point where I'm just like, I'm done with something. Like I'm just, try, avoid, whatever you want to call it. Try to get all caught up in this and make things work in whatever fashion, even though my gut's telling me otherwise. It's sort of like this slow leak, like a deflating balloon or something along those lines, where if anything over the years, I get to that point quicker of like, oh no, this is just, yeah, this ain't gonna work, right? Like, and I need to deal with this now and quit trying to put it off. But I think that there is a cost, like there's a cost to staying comfortable. There's a cost to tolerating, you know, there's a cost to like avoiding.
When I've let go of things, I almost immediately, even if there's things to navigate, feel the energy shift and feel like I have so much more energy to navigate it.
It's a huge relief, I think, for me. And that's the other thing too, where I know that like, you know, that when you were saying earlier about, okay, if we're trying to talk ourselves into something, is that a sign of it, of a change that may need to happen? And I think that's bang on. Like it definitely is for me. And it does become a relief of like, oh my gosh, okay, done. Like the decision's made, even if there's some, you know, stuff to deal with as a result of that decision. That moment of like, decision made, done. Like that's how I know it's the right decision for me, because there's no part of me that doubts it after the fact. There's no part of me that doubts it. I can't always explain it. If somebody comes to me and is like, explain this, why? I need to understand it.
Well, I think it's so interesting because we do that to each other, right? Like, oh, like, cause we don't know what else to talk about, right? So tell me why. Tell me why, as opposed to what would it be like if we instead said, oh, what's that made available for you?
Well, or even being able to honor a response, you know, to honor like when we're talking gut and response and human design and such too, right? Like to be able to honor the fact that like, this is a no, just because it's a no. Yeah. Like that's all there is to it, versus, you know, this is a no because I need to like, you know, for whatever, that's where the head's kicking in. I'm trying to make sense of it, or I'm trying to whatever and all that. That's where our head's definitely kicking in to certain things.
Yeah. So how does this show up with team? How, and one of the questions that came up for me, and I really relate to, I recently saw a video where someone was talking about like they had someone that worked for them for 5 years. They weren't necessarily doing anything wrong, but they weren't a 10, like they weren't a rock star.
Yeah.
And this sense of obligation of like, well, I've been giving them a paycheck for 5 years, so they expect a paycheck next month, the next, right? And like, how does honoring your gut in decision and not needing to explain it, how does that show up? Because I think about the woman who was talking about it and how she was rationalized, like she didn't have a reason to give this person necessarily, right? They always showed up on time. They always, you know, did their thing, but they just weren't right.
Yeah. That's where that, there can either be things that are not working logically or like, you know, structurally and such, which I think it's important to get some of these things in place. But then there are also times where it's like that reason, season, lifetime. Yeah. I mean, people come into our lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And like, you know, Tiffany, who worked with me for years. Yeah. And if you would have asked either one of us a few years ago of like, hey, would we continue to work together? You know, we would have said, yeah, till the end of time kind of deal, right? Like we both would have said that. I mean, we both still say that sometimes, even though we haven't been working together now for a couple of years, but there were circumstances that changed in life. Like it wasn't even, it had nothing to do with like, oh, this or that, or even within the business. There were just things that shifted in her life and some things that were shifting in the business. And it got to the point where it was like, yeah, this ain't working anymore. You know, like, and we really tried to make that work. Like we tried to find a space where everything could work. And it just got to the point where it's like, this isn't working anymore. Like we have to honor the fact that this season is coming to an end. And that's really hard. Like I want to be able to, you know, open up some space, if I may, within this, to just really acknowledge like business relationships can be as deep and challenging and hard as any other relationship in life. And yet we tend to kind of trivialize team stuff sometimes. Like there can be, there can be like a breakup, there can be a mourning period, there can be like, it can be as challenging, and in some cases even a heck of a lot more challenging as any other important relationship in our lives. And I think there are times when it's like, especially if we've done our role as leaders and we've been really purposeful around, okay, have I set expectations and, laid out accountability and empowered this person and given them what they need and boom, boom, boom. Like there's aspects as leaders that we want to, when we've done our work there and it's just not working out, okay, yes, that's where it logically makes sense for something to end. But there can be times too when, especially in businesses like ours, that these are pretty purpose-based businesses. As we continue to grow and evolve as leaders, it's the same idea of like what really hit home for me in that mastermind in relation to my marriage 10 years ago. That was like, as we continue to grow and evolve, that doesn't mean everybody in our team is going to continue to grow and evolve with us. And that's not a reflection on a person like, oh, they're just whatever. It's not this, it's often this in some ways. Like there can be a parting of ways that needs to happen. The challenge is, like you said, there's the obligation, there's the commitment, there's the relationship, when you've worked with someone for a long time, not to say you have to be buddy, we're going on vacation together, but even like there is a relationship there often that transcends the work you do together. But the ultimately it's a real disservice to them, to you, and to the business to keep a working relationship past its due date. Yeah. It really is. It really is.
Because they could be going on to something else also.
And I do say, I don't want to be cheeky about that, right? Because it's always easy to throw out the like, oh, hey, there's something better out there for you, and everything happens for a reason. There's sort of some of these like things that get bandied about, I think, a little too much sometimes, and that can feel a little cheesy around that. But at the same time, it's bang on true. Like when we know if we've done, I feel like my role as a leader is to really be clear first and foremost, like where's the business headed and what does the business need? Yeah. That's my role as a leader. Then to be able to see, okay, who's on the team now? Where are they fitting in? What can they grow into? What can they continue to grow into or not? Right? And if it's an or not, that's where changes need to be made. And to be really willing and purposeful to know that we have done all we can as leaders to really support and see how we can make something work. Yeah. As opposed to like, because it can be equally as easy to say, forget it.
Right.
And always, this person didn't work. This person, that's another form of a pattern.
Yeah.
Things too, right? Where that kind of stuff shows up. So
I love the question, what does the business need?
Yeah.
Which is, kind of can take it out of the personal.
Well, we talk a lot in our OBM community, in the training and in the certified OBM community about the fact that your client isn't your client. It's their business that's your client. Because, you, like me as a business owner, I'm wired a certain way. I might think a certain way. I might want things a certain way. But that doesn't mean that that's what's best for the business.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that when somebody comes in and they're bringing something that maybe they're not like me, or they don't move as fast. Because I'm pretty high on quick start if we're talking, some of that stuff, right? It's a common, gap in teams where one person's like, woo, and the other people are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's like the business needs the whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's slow down for a minute. Let's make sure we got this in place. Let's take a look at that. Like that's good for the business. Yeah. But it's not always fun for me. You're like, come on now.
Right.
What do you mean?
Right.
Yeah. All of that. But the team piece, I think it's that same idea of like, we want to be able to honor our gut within it and to really be aware of, there is an expiry date that we can go past when we've had long-term team members.
Yeah.
That, ultimately needs to be, and if we go too far past that expiry date, it'll just blow up on its own anyways.
Yeah.
Fashion, right?
So when you make gut decisions and then you have team that maybe doesn't, you can't logically explain why this decision is coming from your gut.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think about that when you're expanding your team and bringing on other people who have decision-making authority? How do you delegate your gut? Do you bring in other people who know how to trust their gut? Because that's a different way of doing business, right? If we think about even traditional human resources, which has, the list of all of the things you need to do to be able to fire someone, for example.
Yeah.
Right? There's no place in there for, oh, my gut just said we were at our expiration date.
There's
right? So
yeah. Part of it is knowing who owns what decisions. So one of the things I talk about in team building is, we as the leaders, it's up to us to determine the what, and then it's up to our team to determine the how. So because it's my business, it's my responsibility to determine what's our vision, what are our offerings, what are we doing, what are our goals, boom, 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 right? That's all up to me ultimately, because it's my business. It's not to say my team may not have things to contribute, but ultimately those decisions are up to me. As those things are clear, and this is, not to say this is easy, but this is sort of the goal of a way, especially as we shift from like the hierarchical way of working together to the collaborative way of working together, is we want to have our team members then freed up to determine the how. So it's like, hey, here's what needs to happen. Like we need to get something in place that will do blah, 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 or take care of X kind of thing. Me as a default, because I'm a pretty good doer and I can figure stuff out and all that kind of stuff can kick in. It can be really easy for me to get in the way of all the how.
Yeah.
Whereas if I say to a team member, like, okay, it's you, here's the what, here's what I'm looking for, here's what we're going to measure our progress or success against, is this particular thing happening or being put into play. To leave them to follow their own, to make the decisions, to honor their own responses, whatever that may be in relation to that. That's that distinction there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome distinction.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Because we usually will often get in the way of that.
Yeah.
Some of us. I know I can.
Oh, totally. Especially when it's like, I could do it faster myself. Yeah. Because I know how I like it done, where, someone else may do it different and better. Yeah.
There's always a cost to the I can do it faster myself thing though.
Yes.
That one adds up over time. That's for sure.
Yes. Oh, I've experienced that many, many times. Many times. For me, that's happened in cycles at different times where I just have decided, forget it. I'm just going to do it all myself.
Yeah.
All of it. At every level of my business, I've done that, right? Forget it. I'm just going to do it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a very realistic thing that we come up against in business.
Yeah.
I think for many of us, like those of us who can, because we can do it, right? It's sort of, we were talking about here, like, I can do it, I can take care of things, ooh, et cetera. Like as a default mode, that's what I go to. Then I will. Yeah, for sure.
So Tina, I know you're in the midst of writing a new book, which isn't ready for discussion yet, but how can people work with you, connect with you, get on your list so that they know when it's time to get the new book?
So tinaforsyth.com,
mm-hmm.
my main website, and you can hop on my newsletter list there for those who are interested. I also have a Facebook group, Fearless Women Leaders, that we talk about some of these kinds of things in this journey of life and business and leadership.
And you do a lot of videos where you really cut to the heart of the issue. Mm-hmm. I think, and talk about things that people aren't necessarily talking about.
Well, and I like to be able to like shine a light on things in a way that might be like, oh, and here's what we can do about it.
Yeah.
Too, right? Because there is like, I mean, that's the whole heart of this entire, series and everything, the transformation piece. We're always being called to transform, whether we like it or not. Like, honestly, and I know for myself, there's anytime I'm kind of dealing with something and working through something and evolving, I like to share as much as I can, because chances are someone else is kind of in the same boat.
Yes.
In whatever way, shape, or form. And because we're all in this thing together.
Yes.
That's the ultimate.
And it's typically timely. When I'm personally going through something, it's always timely. Others in my community are. I see it with my clients. They are having similar challenges they're moving through because it's up in the collective consciousness. And that's something that I really admire about you, is you put that, you're putting videos out and you're speaking about the things that people may be feeling or sensing, but they're maybe not aware of or not talking about.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, because I aim to do that. If I can.
Yes.
I aim to be that.
Yes. Awesome. So tinaforsyth.com, fearless women, say it again.
Fearless Women Leaders.
Okay, that's what I thought. I don't think I'm in your Facebook group. I'll have to go get in there. Fearless Women Leaders Facebook group as well.
Awesome.
Anything else you want to leave people with?
Just own what it is you really want and or don't want.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a matter of, I don't know what I want, but I know what I don't want. Either way, like just the fact that we do or don't want something, like that is enough.
Yeah.
To make our decisions from that space.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you for sharing your transformation journey. And for those of you listening, whatever it is you're moving past, however I think the nugget of gold is, if your mind is trying to figure out how you're going to explain your decision to someone, you're looking in the wrong place. Make the decision first based on what's true for you, and the rest will line itself up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Tina. Have an amazing day, everyone. Hey, have you been thinking about integrating retreats into your business? Are you ready for more transformation in your world? Before you make that decision, head on over to retreatandgrowrich.com/stop and download my new free ebook, The Top 12 Reasons Not to Host Your Retreat. In this new guide, I'll be walking you through 12 things to consider before you say yes to that retreat. My intention is to save you time, energy, and money. And of course, that little bit of bruised ego when things go wrong. retreatandgrowrich.com/stop. And let's stop the madness of retreats that don't work today.